Hey guys, and welcome back to another Let's Talk. This time the subject is of course Song of Iron. For those of you who don't want to watch the whole video, my conclusion is this. I think the game is good. It's not perfect, but it's definitely not a bad game. I also think that the game is too short and a bit on the expensive side for what it offers. It does make up for it with a really beautiful world and music. That's pretty much it. That's the best short version that I can give you about about the game. Now, for those of you who want to hear me, kind of break down things in more depth, let us begin. Before I start, I would like to mention two things. The first one, I am reviewing the product, not the developer. I think it's an amazing accomplishment for one person, it really is, but I will not be pulling punches, sort of say, because of that. Again, I am reviewing the product, not the developer or the process. The second thing that I would like to mention is that I use footage from throughout the game apart from one special part towards the end, so this is kind of my spoiler warning for you guys. If you watch my content, you already know what I'm talking about. Now, let's start things off with the thing that you guys are probably most interested in, and that is the combat. Is the combat good? Well, to be honest with you, I think it's both good and bad. Maybe leaning a little bit towards bad, and let me explain why. One thing that I absolutely hate, and if you watch my content, you pretty much know what I'm going to say. It's hyper armor. I am hitting the enemies with swords, axes and spears, and they just don't care. I think that's just ridiculous. From a logical standpoint, if I basically cut you in half with a giant axe, you're not just gonna continue attacking me or charging a heavy attack, like mine doesn't matter at all, right? Well, that's kind of what happens in this game. The only time the enemies are still is basically when they're dead. Apart from that, they just don't care about my attacks. And I think that transforms the game in sort of this, I don't know, mindless hacking, I guess, until you or the enemies fall. And obviously, I think that's a pretty big problem. A lot of the time, I felt like I was just trying to push through them and nothing more. Like it's basically like I said earlier, until one of you falls, either you or the enemies. The fact that you can dodge roll, dodge back and block helps a little, but that's kind of a different story in my opinion. And to be honest with you, that made me enjoy running and jumping more than fighting in the game. Apart from the enemies not giving a damn about your attacks, the only other big problem with the combat that I found is that sometimes enemies just sit around, waiting for you to get closer to them, and then and only then they will start charging at you. If you don't get closer, they just sit still. I don't know, it's like they're being respectful or something. I don't know how to explain it. But yeah, I think that's also a bit of a problem. Now let's talk about sort of the good parts about the combat. In my opinion, the combat is not that clunky, but it is slow. If you think that you're gonna go full blender on the enemies, this game ain't it. Like, it just isn't. I think attacks have weight. I think they have a wind-up time and, things of that nature. And to be honest with you, I think that's awesome. It feels like I'm gonna mess them up when I do an attack, right? I don't know, in my opinion, the attacks do have weight and that's really, really important. Too bad that the enemies are not affected by it though. It's like the weight leaves your body and then vanishes into thin air. Basically, imagine hitting a rock wall with a giant two-handed axe. You have the weight in your attacks, but the rock wall doesn't really care. And that's kind of how it feels, to be honest with you. Now, kicking enemies and throwing your weapons at them are the only two things that have a cause and effect type of thing happening for them. And that's why I think they're great. And if you look at reviews on Steam and stuff like that. Most people really like those two. Gee, I wonder why. I personally think it's because of the hyper armor and the weight transfer basically of those two attacks. Let's also talk about the bow for a second. Honestly, I think it's pretty nice. People are complaining about aiming, but you know what? I kinda like it. Align the arrow with the head of the enemy, and that's it. Headshot. It's really not bad if you ask me. One thing that I really like is the fact that the arrows don't just vanish into thin air. If you hit the enemy, they're in his body. If you hit the ground, you'll find them on the ground. In both cases, you can even pick them up and use them again, even mid-fight, which I think is pretty awesome. Last but not least, shields. I kinda hate blocking in general, so they're kinda meh for me. Also, I used a two-handed axe most of the game, so I really don't care about them. What I thought was pretty nice though is the fact that they break after a few hits. I usually hate that, like just the idea of gear breaking and stuff like that, but in this game it's basically the kind of game where you find like 20 of them laying around probably. So they're not that hard to, pick up and whatever. It also forces you to change tactics. You can't block till the end of time because, the shield is gone. So I think that's pretty interesting as well. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything that I could tell you about the combat. I think it's up for you to decide if it's good or bad. Like the things that I mentioned as bad are definitely, for me personally, are definitely leaning towards the combat being way less than what I hoped it would be. But if you don't care about the hyper armor or, the fact that the enemies kind of sit around from time to time, then I guess you'll be on the side that actually likes the combat. Now, since I kind of got into it, let's talk about the fact that some people call the game clunky. Well, sorry to sound like a broken record again, but yes and no. About the combat clunkiness, I did speak earlier, so I'm not gonna go into it again. I think the combat is not that clunky, it's just really slow paced. The only two other places where I think you can feel the clunkiness is one, when you traverse the environment. Sometimes I had to jump like 2 or maybe 3 times just to grab a freaking ledge. Sometimes even falling to my death because I couldn't latch on, and that was kind of annoying. And number 2 is walking. My god, the character walk speed is way too slow if you ask me. I don't think I was ever able to jump even like the small step without running. I think that's where the most of the game's clunkiness lives. To be perfectly honest with you, I think I would have liked the game a lot, and I mean a lot more, if the character would have sprinted the whole time, both in and out of combat. But unfortunately, that's just another button that you have to constantly press, and sometimes after you jump, you need to press it again. Not always, but sometimes jumping cancels out the sprinting, and it's kind of annoying. I would have personally loved to see like a constant sprinting speed rather than walking and pressing shift and sprinting and switching and whatever, especially since you're never walking. There's barely any reason for you to walk, if you ask me, apart from trying to be stealth and stuff like that. Now, probably the thing that everybody's expecting me to talk about, and of course I am going to talk about it because it's really freaking annoying and I just couldn't believe it was happening. Let's talk about cutscenes. Like I said, this is probably one of my biggest frustrations with the game, maybe even the biggest one. I'm not gonna lie, you cannot, for the love of God, choose when to move the conversation forward. The game will decide that for you. Why? It makes no sense. You're a slow reader? Tough luck. You just freaking missed a piece of information, I guess. You're on YouTube and you want to take your time reading, tough luck again. You're not sure if you understand the information that was just presented to you and you'd like to read it again, you'd better quit and start a new character, I guess, because there's no way of reading that again. That is just insane. I should be able to choose when I am ready to move on to the next line, not the game. You know, let me have that decision. Let me do it when I feel ready. And I think that's really important. To be honest with you, I might have actually missed some lines or part of the story just because I could not read it fast enough. And I think that's kind of stupid because that's something that I cannot do again unless I start a new game. So yeah, in my opinion, that's crazy. That's one of the things that I hate the most about the game. Now speaking of lines, our character does not have any lines. Why? It's not like every other character is voice acted and ours isn't. None of them are. Why not have character lines then? It makes no sense. Not to mention that the characters you interact with don't do monologues. They say stuff, they ask questions, and you reply to them. And then they reply back to you, God knows what, cause, you know, you have no lines, you just have three dots. So let's say the character says, hey, will you join me in Valhalla? And you say three dots. And then he says, how dare you? I've never been more offended in my life. And you're sitting there like, what just happened? I have no idea what my character just said. Since we have text, since we have lines written on the screen for other characters, why not have lines for our character as well? Does that make sense? Like, I just don't see the point of not having lines. Now, another thing that frustrated me about the cutscenes is that they have no border, nothing to tell you, hey idiot, the talking is over, start fighting. Most of the times, battles after cutscenes start with me getting hit once or twice, because cutscenes look just like the actual gameplay. No borders, no super close in, zoom, nothing. At some point the battle starts, and obviously the AI is going to be faster than me because I have no idea that the cutscene ended, and I'm sitting there thinking that, hey, maybe there are more lines, but no, I'm getting punched. And that's kind of weird. And again, the examples that I gave you, they're not like super complicated, right? Just a black border on the bottom, one black at the top that just goes away when the cutscene is over and the actual battle starts. Something like that. Something really simple. Now, the last thing I'm gonna say about cutscenes is about the font and about the lack of, let's call it, style around lines. I get it. One developer and all that, but come on, a normal font with a semi-transparent rectangle with text in it is just, I think it's just not enough. I'm not saying do something mind-blowing, it's just a freaking text rectangle, but something small. There's just nothing about it that says Viking, magical, or gods, or history, and so on and so forth. I'm talking about something like this. Really small that could change the immersion of the player in the world for the better, obviously. Don't get me wrong, this is not great. It took me 5 minutes to do, but it's something in that direction. Now, since we kinda dipped our toes into this, let's also talk about the UI for a little bit. I think it's nice, it's clean, I love it. Just 3 bars on the bottom left, nothing that will stop you from enjoying the beautiful world. So GG on this one, thumbs up, I think it's awesome. What I do not like, on the other hand, is the fact that you cannot freaking see what you are picking up. Yes, you do have the small shield and weapon icons on the ground, but I think that's not enough. If I throw my weapon and I start looking for it alongside the 10 weapons and shields dropped by killed enemies, it's gonna take me a while to find it. I might even give up and pick up something random. I would have loved to see something like, I don't know, kind of like an interface just popping up above the player's head, and using the mouse wheel maybe up and down to scroll through the weapons and choose what to pick and what not to. The mouse wheel was just a random example of how this could have been done. Maybe not the best one, but you get the point. It's just a quality of life thing. Now, speaking of quality of life things, this game works on a checkpoint save type of system. You cannot save manually. It's not too great, but the checkpoints are pretty close to each other, so I don't think that manual save is really necessary. What is not fine, if you ask me, is the fact that you cannot have more than one profile, basically one active game at a time. If I have a game in progress and I want to start a new one for some reason, I can't, because I will delete the previously started game. That is ridiculous. What if, I don't know, in my case, I'm a YouTuber, but I want to play the game a little bit, in my spare time. What do I do then? Well, I'll tell you what I did, to be honest with you. I started the game over and over again, and every time I want to play off recording, let's say, I reached a certain point, and when I wanted to stop, I started a new game and played back until I was back at the point where I needed to record again. I hope that makes sense. And I think that's just crazy. What if let's say my girlfriend wants to play the game? She will ruin my progress, or vice versa. What if I have siblings? You get the point, so I'm gonna stop here. This is a $16.79 game with a 2 hours long campaign with no option for more than one character. That's just crazy. Oh yeah, I kind of forgot to mention this up to this point. It took me almost 2 hours to complete this game. To me, that's just stupidly low. I'm a guy who loves to get lost in a new game and play it until my freaking eyes bleed out. I want to have the chance to start loving the combat, the story, the characters, but in this game, you just don't have the chance to do that because it's over before you know it. The last skill you get, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you get it like 30 minutes tops maybe before the game ends. Like, you just don't have the chance to fall in love with it or whatever, and I think that's crazy. The game is way too short in my opinion, and yes, for the love of God, I know this game was made by only one developer, and that's extremely impressive for sure. When I heard it the first time, I couldn't believe it. I thought it was mind-blowing, it's awesome, but again, at the end of the day, I'm reviewing the product, not the developer. And we're talking about a $16.79 product. This is not something that I usually do or care about, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the price of the game. Usually, if I like a game, I don't care about the price. Not to mention that I already bought it and all that. Plus, I don't think it's that easy to judge if a game is worth or not the price. And I will explain what I mean in just a second. Let me give you sort of a backstory first. A few years ago, I had an eye-opening experience in terms of gaming. I used to be that guy who would say, if a game doesn't have, for example, let's say 2021 graphics, it's not worth playing. And I still believe that, at least to some degree. I'm not sure if it's because I've been modeling and rendering for years now, but graphics matter to me. However, graphics and art style are two different things, and that's kind of the eye-opening experience that I had a few years back. And again, this is not something that I think I will do in the future, but this time I'm going to compare this game with Hades. That game absolutely blew my mind, and it costs only $20 freaking dollars. This game is $16.79. I spent more than 350 hours in a month in Hades until I finished almost everything I could do in it. I only spent 7 hours in Song of Iron, and to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not sure it's worth its price. I'm really sorry for saying this. I'm not trying to be mean or anything. but it feels like the price is just a bit too much. To be fair, I think Hades is also undervalued, so there's that as well. Do with this information what you will, but this thought honestly popped up in my head when I was thinking about the price of the game and all that, and I wanted to share it with you guys. Again, Hades is definitely undervalued, but also I feel like this game is priced a bit too much for what it offers. And yes, this is a one developer game, and that game had actually it had a pretty small team, but it was definitely not one person. Again, product, not developer, and not process. I'm simply talking about what you get in your hand for the money that you've paid. Now let's talk a little bit about bugs. Honestly, GG on this one. From what I remember, I encountered only one bug, and that was when the dragon got stuck midair and disappeared. That's it. So hell yeah, big thumbs up. Apart from that, I don't think I've ever actually encountered any other bugs. In this day and age, that's kind of freaking impressive. Again, you know, it kind of depends on the size of the game and the systems in place and all that, but apart from the dragon thing, the game ran smoothly, and I didn't really encounter any game-breaking bugs or anything like that. Grabbing ledges, like it said, is kind of funky, but I don't know if I can call that a bug or not. But yeah, that's pretty much it on the bugs side of things. Let's talk about let's talk about puzzles. I really enjoyed them in this game. Don't get me wrong, they're not really challenging or whatever. Just your standard push that, climb this, dodge all of those and stuff like that. But I enjoy them, I really did, and they're a nice change of pace. And speaking of enjoyment, I think this is the probably third best thing in this game in my opinion. I kind of spoke about it, and it's weight. And I'm not just talking about the combat. Hitting enemies with my foot, throwing axes at their head, headshotting them with arrows, and especially me getting hit by traps feels like you get hit by a freaking truck. Which for me, for some reason, it's absolutely hilarious. I didn't expect to laugh as much as I did in this game. Basically, even if I tried to be upset because I just got wrecked by a giant hammer, I would instantly burst into laughter, and that was definitely a pleasant surprise. It's just, I don't know, there's just something in the way something hits you. It's just awesome. I just couldn't stop laughing at it. Now let's talk about the number 2 and number 1 best things in this game, in my opinion. Obviously, music and graphics. My god, these two are just great, man. I enjoyed every freaking pixel and every freaking note. These two things made this game an absolutely wonderful experience. I'm not gonna spend too much time on music because I'm not gonna show it to you guys, you know, copyrights and whatever, but trust me, you have to listen to it. It's beautiful. On the graphic side of things, just like with Biomutant, I'm talking about two components. One refers to the models, the textures, the models and the textures, and the other one refers to the beauty and the immersive aspect of the world you are exploring. On the model aspect of things, they're pretty good, apart from I think a contemporary concrete texture on an elevator. I didn't really see anything really bad. I think it's pretty good. On the beauty side of things, oh boy, every cave, every forest, hill and mountain I explored was, I don't know, was simply beautiful. Oh, and that paired with the fact that almost always you could see this cold and warm lighting. I think that was really nice, and this is, to be honest with you, this is what pulled me towards the game, and I still stand by it. I think the game looks beautiful. One more thing that I would like to mention before my conclusion. I don't know if this is true or not, but the game might be part of a trilogy. I think either that or the game will have a sequel, something like this. I'm not exactly sure. I hope I'm not remembering this wrong, but considering the game ends the way it does, it definitely asks for at least a sequel. I think I'm gonna stop now because I don't want to make the let's talk longer than the actual game. I'm sorry. Shots fired here. I'm kidding, I'm kidding. Sort of. Let's wrap up the video and let me give you my conclusion. Again, I mentioned this in the beginning of the video, but I think the game is good. It's not perfect, but it's definitely not a bad game. For me, if it had at least, I don't know, 6 maybe 8 hours of playthrough instead of 2, if the enemies didn't have hyper armor, and if I would have had profiles, I would call this a great game just because of how beautiful the world and the music is. But it does suffer because of these things and a few other things that I mentioned. So I'm not gonna call this a great game. I'm gonna call this a good game, a decent game. Now, that being said, I would like to say congratulations to Joe Winter for making this freaking cool solo debut in the gaming world. I'm really excited to see what you will make in the future, and I hope that you will not see this as something mean or bad, but more as feedback for future projects. I wish you the best of luck, and yeah, congratulations once again for the game. Now, for all of you guys out there, what do you think about the game? Let me know in the comments. Once again, I keep seeing opinions that kind of oppose each other, and I'm really curious to see how many of you played the game and if you enjoyed it, if you thought it was too short like I did, and did it feel clunky and all of that. Let me know in the comments. But yeah, that's going to be it, I think, for today's Let's Talk. So yeah, I enjoyed it, and I'm really glad that I did it. To be honest, my schedule is just ridiculous, and there are 2 more games coming this month, and you know, doing all the drawing for the intro and stuff like that can definitely take a huge chunk of my day. But yeah, I was able to make it in the end, and I hope you enjoyed it. So thank you so much for sticking till the end, and I hope you enjoyed this Let's Talk, and I will see you in the next adventure. Take care.